All right. Hey, everyone. Paul and Kevin are here again. It's been a couple of weeks. And as you know, in 2020, a couple of weeks means the world is on fire and a lot of crazy stuff has happened. We hope everybody's okay out there, and we hope you're staying safe from COVID and that you are not too affected by any of the difficulties and troubles that have been in the country. Kevin, I don't know what you drew for your monthly bingo. I had Alien Invasion for June, so I missed out completely. I don't know what you had.
Well, it's crazy in that just the balance that we're all trying to keep, and I know everybody's trying to keep. We're more blessed than most that we get to work at home and we have all these things. But it's just stuff like I was talking to my mom. She lives in right now there's a fire in Arizona, which is the biggest one in this U.S. We're in 65,000 acres so far. 0% contained. She can see it out of her front porch. It's still in the distance, but you just kind of go like, man, okay, we get it. We did, whatever. It's like, yeah. So it's just, you just worry for everybody.
Well, we've hit a level of absurdity where I saw a tweet the other day that I thought was very funny, which said, whoever the writers are of the 2020 season are bullshit, because I can't believe any of this. They introduced the murder hornets and they didn't even do anything with them. They just let them go, and now they're busy on something else.
And it's like at this point, the murder hornets are positive news.
That's right. Yeah, they're actually interesting. Right. So I just want to say hi to everybody. Jasny, Shaman, Mahir, Sin, nice to see you out there. Toka. It's good to have you, Gabriel, anyone that I missed. It's great to have you, and it's great to have you back. And it's great to be back just chatting again. We had a couple of weeks off to recharge. But what we're going to do this time is we are going to talk about quite possibly one of the most compelling things that's ever been a part of my life, and I think a part of Kevin's, which is Tundra Publishing. And Kevin and I went through something that you could call an experience, an ordeal, you could call it anything, but it was definitely one of a kind moment in history. And when Kevin and I talked before we started doing these things, there was something that we always came back to, which is we could talk for 6 hours about this, right, Kev? We could talk for hours about Tundra. And the truth is, the story's really never been told except by people that I feel were very self-serving, in that they didn't really tell a true story. They told some version of it. But you and I were there, right? We saw everything. And so I think it's fair to be able to say, look, let's tell the story of Tundra Publishing, because it's never been told. And it is one of the more interesting things. If you stand outside of your body and look at it, it's definitely an interesting story, right?
Yes. It's sort of like I was trying to come up with some funny anecdote relating Tundra to World War I, because it lasted about the same period of time, but it just seemed unfair to,
it's unfair to World War I, frankly.
It is. No. The thing is, it's I've talked to different people about Tundra one-on-one. I've done some interviews on it in the past, and it is really hard to encapsulate sort of the what the reality was of that dream, if you will. It was really a dream project in how it unraveled, and being the leader and the master of all of it. That I want to say, first and foremost, I fully take all the blame for what I allowed to happen. You can't, pilot a ship or take command of a position, and then because something bad happens there, that this person doesn't do that or that person doesn't do that, and you just you're still the person in charge. But there were some frustrating things where I feel like, when I look back and felt complaining or regret per se, it was things that happened that just seemed like a string of bad luck, or things that should have worked perfectly because the thought behind it was quote unquote coherent. Getting a pre-press company, doing certain things, bringing in certain aspects of the business that should have been a plus to the business, as well as what's going on in the marketplace, the changes for distribution, which I think that was sort of leaned against us. But it was like, when I would first look at like, say, a particular project we took on, and not to jump too far ahead, but like, we took on projects from creators that wanted to create and publish their own material. And these were people that were selling hundreds of thousands of copies of material through mainstream publishers, Marvel and DC, and yes, 99% of the time, superhero-based projects, except for, say, George Pratt. So us taking on their next project, we feel that there's a pretty good chance that you can attract some of that audience and put you in a position to say, Dave McKean's next project is here at Tundra.
Yes.
And again, we'll get to some of the nuances of that, but I feel like the construct of it, of putting together a progressive company that was creator friendly, that was kind of like a, let's say, esoteric, but it was a publisher that we would take on projects in their merits alone. There wasn't like, we were going to be a superhero company, or we're going to be a horror company, or this kind of company. But we were going to do all of the above and sort of service the market, which, look at a lot of mainstream publishers, they would do the same kind of thing. The same guys that published Superman also published Swamp Thing, and so on and so on. But again, only in relationship alone. And I look at like, we had Ian Ballantyne consulting with as one of the greatest publishers in the world as we tried to do the market. Like that.
Well, we definitely went big or go home, right? We went big at times. That was pretty crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, it was sort of it just, to get into some nuance, but it was really set up on the in my tagline when I would pitch Tundra back in the early days is I wanted to have the Apple Records of comic books, but I didn't want it to end the same way that Apple Records did, which is exactly what happened. And
which is exactly what happened. Yeah.
Remember that? It's like one of my favorite scenes was in the movie The Ruddles, when Eric Idle's interviewing Eric Idle's interviewing George Harrison in front of Apple Records, and they're talking about how well the business is going. And people are just running out from behind them with like 40 machines and instruments, and they're just stealing it blind.
Yeah. It was an interesting time, and so what I think we can do, let's start here, okay?
Sure.
Set the scene for people who don't know what Tundra Publishing is. I'm sure that plenty of people watching do know what it is. And by the way, those people watching, smash the like button or whatever that thing is we're supposed to say. Make sure you get people to come in and watch this because it's very interesting. So to set the scene, at the time, you had tremendous success with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You got all this stuff going on. You can barely breathe because you're so busy, and the Turtles is all consuming. At the time, I was very young. I had come in to start working for you, and I was working over at Mirage Studios, and you came up with the idea of doing Tundra Publishing.
Yeah.
And so from your perspective, what was the point of Tundra? What was it going to be?
Well, it started with, interestingly enough, part of the discussion actually started with Peter Laird at Mirage, where there had been a time when we had expanded the Mirage Publishing brand. Brought in Gizmo and Ray Biker and so many other projects, and then the world changed. The black and white boom and bust happened, and then as you had this new resurgence of creator-owned companies, creator-owned projects with like Image and some other people doing some stuff, and then that sort of fueled by the intensity of a lot of friends that we had in the business that were working for Marvel and DC. That when you go to a convention, you also sit around at a gathering, say a hotel bar or something after the show, and they would talk a lot about, I've got this idea for a project, but I have to draw Spider-Man every month, or I have to write Spider-Man every month, whatever. And I have to pay my mortgage, I've got a family and stuff. I can never break away to do this idea that could be my Ninja Turtle. It could be my next big personal creator-owned project. I want to get into the creator-owned field. So that was the appeal to me, was the good fortune that Peter and I had with the Turtles, was how can we take some of this money that blessed with through the success of our creation and give back to the community in a way that so you could help some creator that's had a dream for an idea or a project that they wanted to see the light of day. So that was sort of the basic foundation. Pete wisely said no. He didn't want to include that kind of scenario within the structure of Mirage Studios because it was still fairly busy at that time. So I decided to take my brand name and my understanding of comics distribution, animation, movies, the experiences that I've had, which are all positive at that point, and bring some of those ideals and some of those skills to sort of have these projects see the light, have an opportunity to perhaps go further and become films or merchandising or other things that could add to not only the company's bottom line, but to the creators that we're working with. And the creators would have the advantage that it would be an 80% split in their 80-20 split with 80% into their
in their favor.
So I started putting together this team of people, and this is sort of Michael Quentin, who worked with printers, publishers. He'd done distribution. He'd done computers. He was managing, I think, 70-person staff at the time with the computer networking. So we had a lot of the qualifications that I thought were great and important to the structure of running and managing a company. There were a number of other people we'll get to later on, but I looked to you, and that you had at that time were running pretty much all of the production at Mirage, and I worked out a situation with Pete and you, of course, first, and brought you over, and then guys like Mark Martin, who was a graphic designer and an awesome one, and new pre-press and new prep and all that stuff. So that was sort of the foundation of what became the first infrastructure of Tundra.
Yeah, and there's an interesting story from my personal perspective, which I don't know if you know, but I'll tell you, it was definitely a challenge for me. So here we are. We got this company, and you came to me and you were very honest, and you said, "Listen, if you love the idea of working on this project, it's for the benefit of creators. It's going to do this. It's going to have Alan Moore or whatever it was that you were doing. If you love that idea, I would love to have you come over. I can't pay you the same way Mirage is paying you," right? That was literally because we were starting out, right? It was understandable. So if you're okay with being paid a little less money to start, it wasn't always the case, but it was sort of like it wasn't going to have the same revenue generation. It was a startup, right? I would love to have you come. And I said, man, I don't even care. Like, I'd love to do that. And there were a couple of reasons why. I wasn't enjoying Mirage as much as I wish I did, right? I think there was such difficulty there at times because there was a lot of money around it. A lot of people had big egos in around the money, right? Not you and Pete. You two were the least egotistical people. But I wasn't really enjoying it. And the idea that I could go out and work on a new endeavor and build something and be part of it from the opening was really cool.
Yep.
But I had a strange moment. I said to you, look, Kev, I'd love to, but I want to make sure that I've got Pete's blessing, like Pete Laird, right? So I drove up to Pete's house in Pelham and I said, Pete, I wanted to ask you about something. Kevin's doing a new publishing company and I would really like to go. I'd like to be part of it. And I want to make sure that that's okay. Because I used to ride motorbikes with Pete. I used to be quite friendly with him. And Pete said, yeah, absolutely no problem. And I went to Tundra and he never spoke to me again. Which to me, I don't know if you knew that, but to me, that was like, damn, I felt like I had done the thing that I needed to do, which is to go and say, would you mind? Do you feel okay with this? He said, yeah, I feel okay with it. And then he never spoke to me again.
No, that's because it is something that, I think that as Pete and I talked and you and I talked, you said you wanted his blessing. Then I did say that, I wanted to hire you away and this and that, but I don't want to damage Mirage Studios and what I was doing from the publishing program at that point. And he was fine with it, but I think, it's hard to know what he was thinking with that, but I know that you did the right thing, and I think whatever gave his blessing, whatever his second thoughts were.
Yeah, and so I think I wouldn't blame Pete for it. I think it was more to do with this, right? I think it was much more to do with that was the first time that you and Pete really decided, or for whatever reason, we're going to go separate ways on an endeavor. You weren't going to do the same thing. You weren't going to be seen as being together, Eastman and Laird. It was going to be Kevin Eastman's Tundra Publishing, and I think that Pete was trying to work his way through it, right? I'm not sure that Pete really felt like comfortable with it.
Yep.
I felt comfortable with it because you had asked him, hey, can I hire Paul away? I had said to him, hey, man, can we still be cordial and friends if that? And he said, yeah, but he didn't dig it, right? So I go over to Tundra, and I remember this. So this company, and I want to make it clear to anybody out there who doesn't know, like Nolan, who said, I'm not really very familiar with Tundra. Let me tell you what this company was from my perspective. It was very clearly for the benefit of creators. Yeah, I get that you wanted to be a publisher. Yeah, I get that you wanted to make money. Yeah, I get this, I get this, I get this. But the fact is that company existed for the benefit of creators. And you may not see your own perspective, Kevin, but the fact is you loved Richard Corbin. You loved all these artists. You kept talking to me about art and artists and creators, and you revered all of these people. All of these creators that you wanted to give an opportunity to, because you personally, Kevin Eastman, had been given a great opportunity. You had made a comic, black and white comic. It did pretty well. The black and white boom hit. Next thing you know, you got a TV show, and you've done really well with it. And I know for a fact that you just wanted to give creators that piece of an opportunity to see if they could have it. Because let's be clear about this. You gave them an 80-20 split. That is not a standard publishing split, okay?
Yep.
To be clear, a standard publishing split at best is a 50-50 split, and normally is less. So what Kevin Eastman did for a bunch of creators was to give them a beacon in the darkness, or whatever you might call it, and say, you guys can come to me and I will publish you and I will give you ownership of your content. And that should have been something that most people said, oh my God, I really want to come to do this with Tundra. And that's kind of the ideal that it was founded on, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's fair. And then at the same time, the Creators' Bill of Rights was created, and it was very important. It was done for a reason. So if you don't mind, can you explain to everybody kind of what the general gist of the Creators' Bill of Rights was?
Yeah. Around the time of things were moving forward, Mirage was having a lot of success because there was a lot of guys, Mirage, like you said, that were very protective of their priority position within the company, because we paid them health insurance, we put them on salary, we covered, they were still allowed to, there were artists there that were allowed to create and submit toy concepts that could be part of an animated show or part of a toy line that would, based on the success, we would split the revenues. Mirage would have to own it for copyright and trademark protection of a character that becomes part of a TV show, but they would get money from that, would split it 50-50 for particular characters that they created. And
ridiculous. That's ridiculous, man.
It's the stuff ridiculous. That we did there was unheard of in fairness level. So that sort of, was just trying to walk this fine and careful line within the creators' rights of, the stuff that we published by those same guys, Michael Dooney with Gizmo and Ryan Brown and all these guys. They continue to own wholly and completely their creation for all the publishing we did those, plus this other level. So with that in mind, going to Tundra and setting up the Creators' Bill of Rights, it was important that we'd had so many conversations with well-known creators' rights advocates and leaders like David Sim, even Alan Moore, and Satin Beach, and other people that had struggles with this kind of stuff. And we said that around this time also there was huge fights with well-documented fights with trying to get Jack Kirby rights back to some of the characters that he owned and incorporated from Marvel. He even kept his artwork at that time. They were trying to fight to give Jack Kirby back his artwork. But Jack was the first one to say, look, the industry was what the industry was when I worked in it. It was work for hire. We knew what we were doing. You know, this people can always change that later, but it's a corporate structure. But we signed away those rights when we did it. But he did want to be shown the respect for what he'd done, and so based on those philosophies, we all got together and we'd have these talks and would say, you're going in to talk to Marvel or DC, or around that time, there were a number of other small publishers, you know, Comico and Capital and Pacific and all these companies that sort of were emerging out of the direct market opportunities. And we just said, look, if you have certain rights to creative control, creative ownership, say over your work, what's to be done with them, a fair percentage of profit, you know, all these things, we just put them in a list. We said, these are the rights you have before you choose to give any of them away. If you choose to give any of them away, at least you're aware of your rights. You did nothing more than say, here it is in one document. You know, Scott McCloud was part of that. There was a number of other smart people wise people that worked at different levels of the comic industry. And we said, these are your rights. And again, if you give them all away, you were aware of what you're giving away. You weren't bamboozled. You didn't sign away the rights to Superman for $200, or sign some. Mike Kaluta used to tell me these stories. Every paycheck he got from Marvel or DC was signed under protest, because it said basically by cashing this check, you hereby give up all your rights to your creations for this company. And so we put this document out, and we get so much backlash from a lot of people just going like, how dare you tell us what our rights are? And we were like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Just telling how.
So let me comment on that, because what I think was happening. One of the things about Mirage about Tundra that people don't understand was, man, did that thing upset the apple cart, right? So we know from personal experience being creators and also being around creators that if you affect what's going on with creators, like if you make it like maybe a bit more difficult, or maybe there's a challenge, or maybe they're a little bit worried about it. If you affect what they're doing, it scares them, and then it messes them up, right? And so I think some of the pushback that we got at Tundra was from creators, and some of the pushback you got about the Creators Bill of Rights was from creators who historically had been scared. And I've seen this before. I saw it in later years when we did Marvel Nights, and we went to the first editorial thing, and all of the editors thought they were just getting fired. So it was crazy, right? Because you got all these editors that are being told by the new publishers, I want you to make good books. And all of them are like beaten dogs. They were just like terrified of it. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit what happened with Tundra, right?
No, you're right. Because I think it is like, if you sided with a creator's Bill of Rights, then that could jeopardize you getting a job over another artist or another writer or thing. And it is like, and it's all about job protection. We see it in Hollywood. We still see it today. Sherry. That's awesome.
Sherry. I just thought I'd bring Sherry up because there's one of our great people who is with us. Hi, Sherry.
Big kiss, big hug. She's awesome. But it was, I think it was that. Plus, there was, around that time, there was a huge fight with Alan Moore in DC about Watchmen, and because that was one of the early pro creator comics where they would starting to get royalties, and they were trying to give this stuff, and we'd have these fights where they would put out all these promotional items for sale that he didn't get any money from because they were promotional items, and he was sort of like, well, you sold them, so it's based on the project, so shouldn't I get so? And there were many other instances of that, but I think there was the same time the backlash came from the upper level, some of the big good companies sort of pushing down on, the other levels, because, guys like McFarlane were jumping ship and, starting their own companies, and Larson, and there was so much other stuff going on that they were losing creatives to creative people, some of the top best-selling creative people, to other industries. It was this rebellion had started, back in the mid-'80s with, we were sort of one of the more noticeable success stories out of self-publishing. There were still underground publishers and stuff before.
Yeah.
But I think that the big two started getting scared. Like, we're losing some of our best people. And suddenly when you have, guys like, Alan Moore or Bill Sienkiewicz or George Pratt or Dave McKean, people that were gravitating to Tundra with projects and ideas, that just immediately to them, they were like, we're losing everybody that normally makes us money, and this could be a real threat. So you had pressure from within to creators, you had pressure from the publishers against, don't go to the other side or they'll be. So there was a lot of.
Yeah, that's true. And so one of the things that then to set the stage in, right? What was Tundra Publishing? Well, we were a threat. We were a threat to the established business. We weren't the reason why the business was struggling, but certainly we were an opportunity for creators like George Pratt and Kent Williams and Dave McKean, a lot of people to come to us, Alan Moore, Bill Sienkiewicz. We were an opportunity for them to actually own and exploit their content. And if you take what was going on with Alan and DC, they were in an argument about Watchmen. There are a lot of people frustrated. A lot of stuff was in upheaval at that moment, and Tundra Publishing was right there. So we naively think, okay, we're a force for good. But, a few other people don't look at us as a force for good. They look at us as a threat or a problem or a difficulty, right?
Yeah, especially, like in the early days, we had Dave McKean brought us projects Neil Gaiman brought us projects. We had Mike Allred brought us the Madman series.
The Madman series,
We had The Crow. We had, all these things that were wonderful creator-owned opportunities that we could do stuff with, and that scares, a lot of people. And, even it's funny because I remember I was reading, once in a Comics Journal where they were talking about Beach and Bissett were saying different things about the company and the stuff that they saw and stuff, which was funny because they would come down once a month. It would be like, we'd have a few meetings and, they really had no concept of the inner workings of the company. But and it was usually Bissett would come in and he'd be so late on everything that everything he ever did for the company period was beyond late, fucked up, late mass on every level. But I remember having this conversation with Beach was involved with it with Quentin Eastman, and they were talking. Quentin was like, "We should have a good superhero as part of the company," which is why we had interest in Madman and The Crow. Those were kind of superheroes. And I remember Rick, Beach, and Bissett both went, to great lengths to explain to Quentin why Tundra should not publish any superheroes, and it's not a superhero company. It's this kind of company, this kind of company. So I'm trying to think. You probably remember, what were the two superhero projects that Rick brought us?
So Rick Veitch then goes and brings us Brat Pack, right? The Maximortal. So, don't do superheroes, and then here comes this superhero thing. You're right?
So it's a duality of sort of like, and that's in print, it's funny because they say that, we went to great lengths to say no superheroes at Tundra, and then you look at what they published with us, which was superheroes. Anyway, I love that stuff because it is sort of like, if you can't fact check yourself, then you shouldn't.
Well, what we're going to do as we talk, Kev, is here's what I think needs to be said about this, right? It's funny. So Gib Birkel, who's a friend of mine who runs a Laughing Ogre comic store in Ohio, it's the best store that I've ever been in, by the way, in Columbus. Asked us about the Comics Journal interview, and we'll set that up, right? Because that Comics Journal interview was a challenge. Certainly, it didn't make me very happy, but we'll get there. But what I think is worth talking about is, okay, let's get people to understand what Tundra was, right? So hopefully people understand. Tundra was intended to be a force for good. Tundra was genuinely designed on the back of the Creators' Bill of Rights. It was intended to be that thing. We had brought in a bunch of creators, and these were rock stars. Some of these people were the top people, and Neil Gaiman was coming to us, and, we had all these people coming to us, and they all wanted to be a part of us, right? So this is great, but I think it's fair for us to look at it and say, okay, well, we can admit to the things that we didn't do correctly. We were a little bit naive at times because it was our first giant publishing company, right? So, and even though you'd been through Mirage, that was Mirage Studios with the Ninja Turtles was such a force. It was almost like a force of nature, right? Tundra Publishing, on the other hand, needed to be a business. And so we needed to kind of run it as a business. We needed to try to make it work. And so we had to do all these things. So to begin with, here we go. We open up this company. I remember going over there to start and immediately going, wow, there's a lot to do. And I love that kind of challenge, right? So to give you a sense of like what this was, we had an art director, Mark Martin, great cartoonist, very hardworking guy. He's very humble, good dude. Always been friends with him, and so we've remained friends for all this time. And he was one of the good people, right? And let's be fair. I don't know how the vetting process at times went, but we had good people there and we had some not so good people there. It was a challenge at times, right? So I remember going into Tundra and starting to work and Mark coming over to me and saying, hey man, we need to strip some film. And in those days it was like, you didn't get to like scan everything in. You need to move around film and move pieces around and stuff like that. And I would say, well, look, I don't know how to do it, man, but you show me and I will strip film. And so he took me around the back. We sat down. He showed me some stuff. I started cutting and pasting because the good people, the people that really cared about Tundra, I feel, were the ones that said, I don't really care that we're not set up yet. I don't really care that we don't know what we're doing yet. This is what I do care about. We're going to go and try to make this work. And it's not going to be easy, but I mean, what startup company is easy? So you, myself, Mark Martin, a bunch of good people in there who came in that were really good. Were sorry, I don't mean to say that about myself, but I just feel like we worked really hard. We came in and we tried to make it the best go of that thing. Man, I was a single guy at the time with a corgi, right? With a Welsh corgi driving into the redoubtable Shadwell. And I would drive into that business and I would get there sometimes, and the doors would be locked and Susan Alston up front would come and open the doors or something. And I'd go across the street, get myself an egg sandwich, and then I would come out and it would be like 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And the crazy thing is there'd be times when it'd be like 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd leave in and you guys were still over there working, right? So to be fair, people really tried hard to make that company work, right? It wasn't a fuck up. It was a lot of people working really hard, right? But we can admit that we made a few mistakes along the way. So let's talk about one of those that I think is a mistake in hindsight, but didn't really seem like a mistake. So I'm here to tell everybody, the one thing that happens, I think, when you have money or people perceive that you have money. So Kevin is a person that people perceive have money and or was doing quite well for himself, is that it highlights the weakest part of your personality, I think. What's the weakest part of Kevin's personality? Frankly, your generosity. And what happened was everybody came running at you and said, Kevin, I got a project. And you said, yes, to fucking everybody, right? Like you said.
You went, yeah. I said no. No, but it's funny. But
you ever said no, but it was famous. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no. Had to be at least one no along the way. No, I can think of a couple of them. But no, I think that the thing that was interesting, at least initially, what you said is that generosity is one thing. My belief in people, and especially good people, is unwavering, and I think that in so many cases is what got me into trouble, where I would sort of believe in, and we'll get to some of those in a minute without going too crazy. But it was like when you're starting to build a company, and it's based on a lot of ideas from a lot of creators that we're all huge fans of. And so we saw an opportunity where, so we had George Pratt came to us with a project. He had just won, I think, a bajillion awards for Enemy Ace. And so we said yes to his next project. Ken Williams brought us a project after huge success with many, many things within the comics community. Dave McKean brought us, fresh off the heels of Arkham Asylum, brought us a project. Alan Moore, and you're going down this list, Neil Gaiman, and so as you go down this list, in what I'm seeing, in my opinion, is yes, there were a lot of yeses, but I saw those yeses as a cornerstone to build a powerful company that it's almost like markets itself, where it's like you can basically put out there to the comics community, the distributors, the very limited media we had, Amazing Heroes, Comics Journal, whatever. But you had a structure that all these top creators are bringing their projects to Tundra. So I felt that sort of being our first wave of attack was very, very powerful. It said a lot about what our commitment was and that they were creator owned and that stuff. Along the way, it's like suddenly there was, be careful what you wish for, because then you did have projects like The Crow came along, and there was an opportunity there. There was projects like Madman came along, which was opportunities there. So you saw all these opportunities, but then you had other projects that were extremely esoteric and
Yep.
probably not moneymakers, or not probably, most likely, almost guaranteed not to make any money and help the company, but I still felt had some sort of merit that needed to see the light of day, whether it be, say, Bonesaw or Rain or some of these other ones, which were just miserable failures in the sense that they sold nothing and cost us a lot of money, but more importantly, that my structure, the infrastructure that I built within the company, suddenly when, we didn't have editors, we wanted, at Mirage Studio, we didn't really have editors. You had people straw bosses that sort of took things through to production, took through the steps of production to the distribution. So suddenly, when I've got a straw boss like you, then I need you to work with Dave McKean and Sienkiewicz, and I do on all the British creators and a number of other things like, Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. Remember that was the Mike Flug book, which is going to be a huge hit for all of us. So suddenly, you're instantly overwhelmed, and I'm still not saying no. Then we bring on, another straw boss or two, which they're instantly overwhelmed, but they weren't good people in the sense that they were there for different reasons, and also were. I didn't do a lot of resume checking. It was a lot of people that were quote unquote highly recommended, and to me that looking back in hindsight, these were people that were failing upwards, and they were leaving other companies before they get fired, but came highly recommended to me. So I believe that this would be a good person to take over this project, and this project, as I brought in other projects that we wanted to do. And it just sort of was like a long story short of just sort of completely compounding, destroying, taking away from, say, your focus and other good editors, straw bosses, focus on projects that were great and needed attention. Suddenly you weren't able to, that's why you were there from like 7 a.m. till 2 a.m, because you're putting out fires for some other fucking thing that came in that was like, here's a project that sold 60,000 copies at another company. The Crow, to be blatantly, that was one of the ones that was quote unquote a huge seller. And I remember talking to Gary Reed about getting out of the contract that he had, because Caliber Publishing did The Crow. And I remember calling Gary and saying, hey, I'd like to take over The Crow because James isn't happy with this. And he goes, you can have him. And I was like, because James was like, and again, I love James. I love The Crow. It's a whole different level of nuttiness there. But it's like these projects just came with a lot of baggage and a lot of problems. So suddenly it was just distraction after distraction, that you guys were more like firemen than doing the job you should have been doing, which is making sure some of the stuff that was the coolest, biggest, most important creative stuff, which is just training. I could go, like you said, we could talk about it for 6 hours. I mean, I think every time the set would come out, I spent a couple of days. It was just a nightmare of just clusterfuckery of stuff that he was trying to do, and disorganization and stuff he was organizing in his car on the way down.
It was a challenge, right? And so if we look at what was happening, right, Yes, we had Alan Moore, right? Alan Moore's script. I mean, it's always going to be my privilege to be able to say, man, I used to get Alan Moore's script. So, I was a straw boss and editor / on From Hell, right? I had big numbers. I would get Alan's scripts, and I would be the only person in the world that held his script, because he would make them on his typewriter. And when he sent them to us, I don't even think Alan owned a photocopier. So until we photocopied the script, it was the only one in existence. And so you get it. It would be giant. It would be this huge freaking novel for each script that he wrote. So at the same time, as you said, we had a bunch of lesser known creators or people who were just starting out, or we were, and to be fair, they were more of a challenge usually. They were more needy. They were less experienced. They had problems. And so we spent a lot of time. And Mark and myself especially, I think, our hair was on fire. We were on fire, but we kind of loved it, man. We weren't like crying about it. We were just like, wow, I can't even breathe right now, but okay. And we'd run around solving problems, and you'd run around solving problems. And
well, it's just so funny, and I don't mean to keep bringing up Steve Bissett, but I'm gonna anyway. Because just out of respect for Steve Bissett, he did amazing things in the world of comics. He's a respected and should be respected creator. He's done a number of wonderful things, but I remember we took on From Hell as a way to support Steve in his independently published Spider Baby graphics Taboo comics. And so we had the right to publish From Hell after it was published in Spider Baby. And so I think we get to publish the first issue of From Hell, and people of course loved it, and it was clamoring for the next one. But Steve was only be able to put out issue of Taboo about once a year, maybe twice if we're lucky, and it was just a nightmare. But it was like, no, just like Jasneet mentioned the thing about the cave paintings.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Actually, I left that up for a while. Yeah, it's actually a great story.
I saw it. I was going to address it, but the cool thing is that Tundra came from to me, because it was around the time I was also putting together the Words and Pictures Museum, which was another huge passion project of mine. And to me, it was telling pictures with words and stories, words and pictures, basically came from those first cave paintings. It was pictures first. It's like you'd have these beautiful cave paintings, and that's how they used to sign their cave paintings. A lot of times, like they put the hand up and like paint on it. So they would have these hand signals, symbols that decorated all the caves. But that was sort of that was it. The mighty Tundra and the mighty woolly mammoth is a thunder symbol in the hand. That was the dream.
Well, I've lectured about it quite often in colleges, and I've been fortunate enough to give a number of lectures on futurism, and I spoke at the CUSP conference in Chicago years ago, and I would often bring up a similar thing and it was all about the Words and Pictures Museum and about storytelling. Close your eyes, picture yourself back in time. You're going into a cave. The first thing you see is a guy with a spear in his hand. The next thing you see is a buffalo. The next thing you see is a buffalo with a spear in it. Guess what? That's a comic book, right? And that's something that you had at the Words and Pictures Museum. That's what Tundra Publishing was all about. We felt, and this was your name, right? We felt that Tundra represented the oldest form of human artistic expression, which is sequential narrative or comics. That's what it is. So Tundra was always going to be promoting the art form and promoting the creators, right? Now, we come in, we've got these creators, and I think, and we're just being honest, right? I think that we can look at things. I don't think there are any mistakes of the heart. I don't think that we ever made a mistake where the intentions were wrong or that we didn't even think it through. But here's a problem that we ran into quite early, Kevin. I'm sure you can remember these discussions between me and yourself and Kelly Meeks, the who ended up being the VP, and maybe Mark. Are we creator controlled or are we creator approved? And we struggle with that. Do we get controlled by are the projects controlled by the creator, or are we approved by the creator? And the problem with it is, if we're controlled by the creator, then sometimes so is the money and the expense of the project. And I'll talk about that from production side of it. I ran into all kinds of problems because at times we were creator controlled. And the smarter creators and the ones with more experience realized they can't control everything. It'll never work. But a lot of other creators were like, I control this project. It's mine, damn it. And then you struggled, right? Because it was like, look, I can't please you. If you control the project, but you live in, Madison, Wisconsin, how am I going to do this with you? It's going to be really hard. So we always have difficulty with that, right?
No, I was just saying it's funny that I was just thinking that I think it's up on you go to KevinEastmanStudios.com. There's a Kevin Russell who does all of our website. He's one of the owners of Kevin Eastman Studios, one of the partners of Kevin Eastman Studios. He found an original digital tour that Craig Farley had done. Remember Craig?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, Craig did this digital tour of Words and Pictures Museum, where it starts you out. You're literally standing in the middle of Northampton, the crosswalk.
Yeah.
And then you sort of can go through it. It just has a little arrow, so you can open the door, and you can go into the store, and you can go through the cave, and you can go up all of the floors. I'm pretty sure it's up on Kevin Eastman Studios now, and if you haven't seen it in a while, Paul, you should check it out because it'll bring back some great memories. But if fans wanted to see a bit more of what Words and Pictures was about, you can go check it out.
Here you go, KevinEastmanStudios.com. We threw it down the bottom. I forgot to do the ticker. Here you go. So go to KevinEastmanStudios.com and you can see is it like an old walkthrough, like a digital walkthrough or something?
Where you can walk through and you can sort of do a 360 thing. So you can go stand and say in the middle of one of the galleries and just click and do a full 360 viewing of it and then move around the gallery. And stuff.
Okay.
But brilliant. Going back to the point that you elaborated, you went on to, which is so right, because that was a typical thing, because you would have, things like, it went too far. I let it go too far with too much creative control, but at the same time, you sort of wanted to be there to support the artistic nature and the quality of the material. But when you were having people, we would have these discussions again, which became incredibly tedious and crazy for the straw bosses like yourself, where you would have a creator that wants a 200-pound semi-matte coated stock printed with a Smithsonian binding for whatever, and you just kind of go like, well, okay, but you got to understand, because this is, we're trying to do this together. If you do it this way, square bound and this size, it'll cost us about $4 a book. If you do it the way you want to do it, it's going to cost us $17 a book.
No shit.
So we're going to have to charge $40 a book. And I said, you're cutting out your buying market where, yes, you might have somebody that'll pick up, this book that's a little out of the norm. If they're going to, they'll go the extra distance and pay $9.95 or $12.90, whatever. But if suddenly now they're spending $40, it just puts it in a whole other stratosphere. And I think that was the problem, is we let some of the costs go too far. And that's why, one of the other big mistakes I made, which was done with the right intent, was, and I might be jumping ahead but it sort of becomes part of the narrative, is that we had this idea to invest into a film company, Pro Media Graphics, which would strip the film, and then they would potentially be saving us loads and loads of money, because they would do the work for us at cost say, in the deal that we worked out with them, say if they were running 2 shifts, one shift would be doing all the work for us at cost, and the other part would be doing their work at whatever the full rate was. So they could carry on as a business, and we could produce.
I have a question. Can you see the blood draining out my eyes? Because that was we'll get to that in a little bit. But
that was a nightmare. Yeah, we should.
It was a challenge, right? Going back to just finishing up on the pitches and the stuff that we had. We had loads of them, but I can remember any number of people coming in and out of that building, right? I remember that Brian Polito came to us with Evil Ernie. And he pitched it to us. I think that was one of the few that we didn't do, in large part because I think we were so inundated with projects that by the time Brian came to us.
probably.
But we had all kinds of people coming. I mean, we had people at times, we had dear old Archie Goodwin come to talk to us about working with us, and he was a wonderful guy. He wasn't very well at the time. It would have been tremendous for us editorially, I think, but he was struggling a little bit, obviously, with his health, and he ended up passing away probably a year after we were talking to him about being involved. But here we were. I'm going to tell you one of mine, and then you can think for a second about one of yours. I'm going to tell you the craziest pitch that I got, right? Because for a while, I had a stack in my office, and it was, I don't even know how to kind of say, it was about that high. And there were maybe 3 piles of it. I had so many of these because there's no way for us to do any more of these, but we got pitches. So one day I'm working away and I get this thing in the mail. It was a FedEx package. And pretty much, I got a tip, by the way, for creators that want to break into comics. If you want an editor to actually look at your stuff, send it FedEx, because they think it's Christmas and they'll open a FedEx. They're not going to open the mail. So I get a FedEx package, and it has a red baseball in it, and a card that says the word red. And then the next day, I get a car. It's like a little toy car, and it's red, and a package that says red. And every day I'm getting one of these things, and it's addressed to me, and it says red. And the girl I was going out with at the time was a little jealous. She had a lot of jealousy, and she got really jealous of whoever the hell was sending me these red love letters. And she got really mad and started screaming at me, and we broke up. The very next Monday, this is probably on a Friday or Saturday, she's like, I can't believe that someone's like doing that with you and you wouldn't tell them to go away. And I'm like, I didn't have anything to do with it. I don't know what it is. And we ended up breaking up, getting a big fight. And on the Monday, I came in, and it was a creator, a very well-known creator. And they said, hey, I've been sending you those red things. How do you like it? And I'm like, not so much.
Yeah, it's crazy. What was it? Was that a project we said no to?
That was one that I'm sure we said no to, because I'm like, thanks a bunch. Crazy. We had.
No, for me, I think one of the ones because there's so many. One of the ones I think we both got over-invested in because we loved it, but it was just an absolute nightmare clusterfuck from the word go, which you probably know what I'm going to say, which is the Peter Pan project.
Oh, God.
We I love, Craig Hamilton.
Craig Hamilton.
He was, I think, Craig, the artist, but it's like Craig Hamilton brought it in and spun us this outrageous story of what happened. And I think about half of it was probably 35 or 40 pages of material, maybe 20 pages of ink, another 20 pages half inked, and there was, the rest that was going on, and he spun some fantastical imaginary tale of the issues he was having with his publisher and this and that. And so we fell in love with the project because it was just this exciting, new and different version of Peter Pan. As the project evolved, I think we found out pretty much that he was in a huge feud with the publisher because he wasn't turning the work in.
Yep.
And then he got some massive feud with the inker, which was Rick Bryant, I believe.
Rick Bryant. Yeah, Rick
Bryant.
Bryant.
Yeah, because Rick then owned some percentage of it, and then they had some big fight, so he wouldn't even work on it. But said if he worked on it, he'd only get charged. So we ended up spending all this time, and I think we even spent some money to get some of the material away from the publisher and see if we could put it back on track. And it never went any further. The feud never ended. We just sat on this big pile of beautiful artwork for a couple of years, and then finally that was one of those. It's like Swamp Thing '88, or just some of these projects is just never saw the light of day.
Let's be clear about something, okay? Some people could say, oh, well, you guys messed up then, right? Oh, we shouldn't have brought in a project that had so many challenges. Okay, fair enough. Okay, I'll give you that to some extent, but let's be fair to you and be fair to us, right? Oftentimes, someone will come with a project that was compromised. We didn't know it was compromised. We're not going to sit there and vet every single aspect of every single creator, because guess what? We trust the creators. We trust you. We're not going to believe that you're not telling us the truth, or that you're hiding something, or that you're not going to be a very nice person to work with. I will admit, we didn't vet creators in the way that we should have vetted some of those creators. But to be fair to us, and to be especially fair to you, hey, guess what? If you're crime in that, was that you trusted people, then I don't think people should be sitting there going, well, Kevin, I would never have done it like that. It's like, yeah, okay, sure, you wouldn't have done it like that. But guess what? We did, because we trusted people. And you were very trusting, so we wouldn't have seen that that project was going to be such a mess. And when did we find out it was such a mess? When we started working with the creators and we found out what a mess they'd given us. And at that point, it was like fire number 703. And so we started trying to fix it. Now, people can blame us.
Yeah. No, but you're right. And it's not like we're, the intent is not to, because, to defend ourselves in what the decisions made. There was a lot, I made a lot of bad decisions and stuff, but it's more like, it's what I want to say is, just so we're clear, because you're exactly right in that, if somebody comes to you and says, that person is not doing my project and this, and they are literally lying to you.
Yep.
You say, okay, well, yes, we feel this is something that we could help you fight for, but also because we see this as a business opportunity that we believe could be profitable, for the company, because not only this amazing project that could see the light of day, that could have legs in the comic market, that could potentially have legs in the bookstore market, which we were actively in furiously pursuing with Ian Ballantyne and those kinds of things, that we had also film opportunities that we, I had invested part of Limelight Films, Steve Barrett, the Turtle movies and some of the other things that we were doing with them creatively. So the decision was made based on, well, if this, and this fits into a business model that we think could work. And then, like you said, it just starts unraveling. You just kind of go like, well, that guy's lying. It's like, so you got to go, who's lying? Are you lying, or is he lying? Well, he's lying. Well, he's lying. Well, then you kind of go like you said, fire number 703, and like,
yeah. But to be fair, it's because we didn't think people would come to us and be dishonest. We didn't think that you had such a reverence for creators. You didn't think they were going to come and lie to us. You didn't think they were going to come and try to just get money, which some of them did, right? You didn't think that creators would do that, because that's not what you saw creators as being. You had maybe too much reverence for creators, but you had a good heart and you wanted them to benefit the way that you had benefited. So for anyone to kind of come at us postways and say, well, you guys messed up, you were too naive, we go, okay, guilty as charged, right? We were a bit naive. But that being said, we were also people that cared, and we worked really hard to try to build the creative community, hence setting the table for Image Comics, hence the Creators Bill of Rights, hence a bunch of projects that built, hence giving Alan Moore a publisher that he trusted. We did a bunch of really, really good stuff. So at that point, then we've got have a bunch of creators on, and we don't know what we're in for. We're about to find out. And we go out to a couple of conventions, and we go to our first San Diego Comic-Con, and you and I go to Dragon Con, which is the best story. Right? We go to Dragon Con. So I'll do San Diego Comic-Con first, to give people a sense of how fucking nuts it was when we went to do Dragon Con and our first shows. I had to literally kind of stand guard for some of our people, because we would have like Dave McKean and George Pratt, and they would just have lines all over the place. And so we would stand guard to make sure that they would be okay. We had one of our employees, and we'll get into the employees in a second, because some of them were amazing and some of them were a challenge. We had one of our employees that I had to chase. We had a Tundra suite. It was literally the suite on the corner of a hotel in San Diego Comic-Con, and they had a 2-room suite. And we basically used it as a place to entertain people, right? So we go in, we entertain people in the suite. And what we don't know is these guys, our employees, are just using it to just be debaucherous and insane. I end up going up to that suite. And at one point, that employee goes running down the hallway to chase down Neil Gaiman, because he's going to punch his face in. Right? He said, I don't like Neil Gaiman. They had some problem when they both worked at the BBC. And so he decided to chase Neil Gaiman down to get in a fist fight with him. And I had to chase the guy down and wrestle him down in a hallway, then get into a I kid you not, like a physical altercation with him, which he didn't really stand much of a chance of winning, but he was swinging wildly because he was very drunk, and then pick him up and say, what do you think you're doing? We're a company. You don't get to do that on behalf of Tundra Publishing, and shove him down the hallway towards the suite. So just so that we're clear, it wasn't exactly as though it was super simple. There were some challenges, right? And we never saw these coming.
Oh, God, yeah. No, there was just...
Go ahead.
No, that was, because it was like one of the first years, even into the second year at San Diego, it was just one of those expenses where, actually you went with us to Angoulême as well. We went to
Angoulême, yeah.
One of the featured publishers. The thing was, it was a tremendous expense, and it was there to sort of, we would have, as you said, we'd have, George Pratt signing his project, John Muth with Mythology of an Abandoned City, Bill Sienkiewicz working, the space was, we wanted to show that we were very serious about it, and those things cost a fortune. But yeah, there were people that, there was one particular, I think it was like I said 5 months ago. No, like the person you might be referencing, chasing down demon, was literally was came to us, was recommended by 3 different people, as he was one of the head marketing executives at the BBC before he came to the United States, and was looking for work. And so, we brought him in, and it was just one of those things that, it was like John C. Gardner's. I was just like, the guy was like, everything was a lie. Everything was
every
single
thing.
It was just one of those things that.
Yep, everything. That particular, that particular person we're talking about, was an employee of Tundra. You brought him on with all good faith. He came highly recommended, and the only thing he ever did was bullshit. He'd never done any of the things he said he had done. He never told the truth. He had, understandably, I'll forgive him, like he had some substance issues, and people have that. Okay, fine, right? I get it. And maybe they can even encroach in your life. But the point was, you didn't just have substance issues, man. You had personal issues, you had anger issues, you had stuff that you didn't tell the truth about. Like, everything was a problem with this guy. And he was a fundamental core part of our interactions with creators. So all that Mark and myself and you would do would be to like cover his ass every so often. We would literally kind of solve the problem that this guy was creating. And we're like, what's happening here? So I'm going to kind of go through a list. Go ahead. Well, I'm going to go through a list of people.
I was just going to say,
yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
No, I just want to say it was just one of those things that, like I said earlier, the frustrating part for me, feeling the frustration for the employees that were working exceptionally hard on every level to really, even like, I think finally, Susan Alston, I think, did some real serious background checks on this employee, and we had to let him go because we found out even more. He was just why. But it just took more away from, like, everything was one of 750 fires that just couldn't be dealt with in a day, and you just sort of like, Monday morning.
That particular employee, I actually was in a position as director at that point, and I was very young, man. I was 24 years old, and I was a director of the company. At a time, if you recall, I had 4 business cards. One was head of production, one was editor-in-chief, one was after the restructuring for director of editorial, I should say. One was director of marketing, because I took that over just because we didn't have anyone at the time. And then one of them was director of licensing, because we may not have started a licensing program. And so because I'd been with the Turtles, we kind of did it, right? So you've got these employees. Now, let me start with a good one, right? There was a woman who worked up front, and she started basically answering the phones. And she was such a good employee. She was so great that I asked you, can I hire her back to help me run production? She wasn't trained for that. But when you get a good employee, she came right back. She worked with me. Before long, she ran production, because I was so busy doing other things. So there are some tremendous people in there. I want to make it clear that there were some wonderful people. At the same
My
time, the
goodness,
guy
yeah.
that we're talking about was a massive problem. We had, I'm going to make the blood run cold in your veins right now. We had one moment where an accountant that we had, nice guy, he would do these things called break evens. They were like Excel sheets. And we had a project that I didn't understand. I could read the Excel program sheet and it would say we were going to make money. You know, our break even sale on this thing would be like 7,000 copies. And that was perfectly doable. Like our projections felt like we could sell 7,000 copies of this. So one day I'm looking at this Excel sheet and I double click on one of the areas. I double click on it. And as I double click on this area, a formula comes flying up. And I realize it's a mathematical formula. And I'm thinking to myself, Excel works with mathematical formulas. Let me look at this thing for a second. And I go through the math formulas and I find one. And I realize, hang on a minute, this one says minus when it should say plus. What's going on with this Excel sheet? I'm not kidding you. This is, I don't know if you know or remember this, but I found this minus sign.
Oh, yeah.
And so I go to the accountant and I say, hey, man, isn't this supposed to be a plus sign or whatever the opposite was? And he said, yeah, you know, you should have been an accountant. And my answer was, mate, you should have been a fucking accountant. Like, I don't need to be an accountant. You need to be one. We changed that formula to a plus sign. And then it told us that we had to do 110,000 copies to break even. And I knew it. You know, I knew that we were going to have that problem. We got an accountant who was supposed to be doing that. And he wrote these custom programs for us. But guess what? He wrote them wrong for a while. And so we were struggling to put these things together. And as a result, I then had to call the creators and say to them, listen, we need to change what's being done. And they rebelled. They were angry. They were frustrated. They said, you never told us we had to do this again. And you're not doing it right. You told us that we could choose gold leaf covers and, you know, special stuff. And we're like, you can't make us spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this project. We had, and this is,
because that was one of the ones, you know, that guy, that particularly, again, it's not a defense thing or anything, but it was one of those, this guy was hired by somebody else in the company, then was let go, but it was one of those things that just came highly vetted and highly respected local accountant. It was, you know, a absolute gold star at a local company. And just about, you know, when you started going into, like you said, what he was doing after the guy that hired him left, and then we ended up getting that guy and bringing in a new structure. But everything he did was wrong. It was like, I mean, he was putting in like, because we were just, he would do things like this, and this is where it got a little dicey with creators too. Like some of the stuff he's saying, like he was putting in, the company would buy a bouquet of flowers, something that would be out front, you know, once a week as you come into the office. He was taking percentage of that, you know, say $30 bouquet of flowers and dividing it between all the projects. He was taking the coffee that you were buying or the soda. He was taking all these costs, and I just said, and so we were just like, who told you to do that? I said, this isn't stuff you apply to the project. It's sort of like, this is sort of company overhead is here as a cost, and you sort of, that's part of the cost, but it's not directly applied to the things. This is sort of our share of the profit. It's like we're talking, you know, but it was just one of those things at that point. It had just gone so far astray that then people would read it and want to know what this charge is. It's like getting a cell phone bill, and you're like, what is this tax? Or what is this thing for? You go, I don't know. And like you said, and the client was,
and so it's not, you know, like people can always look at us and we're going to be the first people to say, well, yeah, that's our fault. We hired a guy that didn't work, you know, like, okay, fine. But guess what? At a certain point, you expect a level of professionalism. You vet the guy out. It doesn't work out. But you can't charge a creator for some flowers that went up front or some coffee that went in the break room. But we did. And then we had to go back and undo that. And remember, every time that we had to go back and undo that, it would usually either be you, myself, Mark, or probably Kelly. or maybe Susan, right? It would be the people that were there from the beginning to the end of the day, always going back, rolling their sleeves up and going, fixing the problem. And so we weren't just overwhelmed with projects, we were overwhelmed with a bunch of stuff, and it was a challenge. I'm going to tell you the two situations that even to this day I have a struggle getting past, right? Martin and I were working back, and we would work really hard. We would just be stripping film. There she is, Miss America.
Hi, Mrs. Eastman.
There she is.
Running Shane out to soccer.
All right. Do well, Shane. So there we are, right? And we've got these projects, and we're working really hard. We're struggling. We're trying to make it all work. And we are told that we're going to hire a new editor who's coming in from a different publisher. So we got an editor coming in from an established publisher, and we're like, well, you know, the guy's been around. He's obviously had a job, you know. He comes from another place. It's not like we're hiring blind. We're not hiring some dude from down the street. We've got a guy coming in from the West Coast. And I'll never forget, Kevin, the first day that guy came to work, and he kind of walks in, and you could tell immediately that he had a chip on his shoulder. And we went, man, he's probably, who cares, right? Like Mark Martin and I were very laid back, and we were both out back, and we happened to be stripping film that day, right? It's not my job description to strip film, but my job description is to help Tundra Publishing do the best it can. So we're stripping film and we're fixing stuff up. And this new editor comes in, and we say, hey, man, this is what we probably need right now. Can you help us strip this film? Paul will go do this. Mark will do that. You do this, and we're all good. We'll keep working. About 2 hours into this, Mark Martin calls me on the phone in my office, and he says, come to my office. And so I wander over to his office, and he said, look out the window. I look out the window, and this new guy is pissed. His face is beet red, and he's just sitting there shaking his head, staring at the desk. And Mark, who's a very sardonic guy, kind of looks at me and he says, should we go talk to him? I'm like, I don't know. Do you want to do it? And he's like, you go talk to him. So I go over to this brand new editor, and I say, hey, bud, hey, is everything okay? Because it seems like you're not happy. And he literally threw his pens down on the table and said, I wasn't brought here to do this. And you're like, damn, dude, that's an amazing way to start your first day. You weren't brought here to do this. I tell you what you were brought here to do, man. Help the company. That's what you were brought here to do. But you started on your first day within the first hour, and you were angry because you weren't doing the job that you thought you were supposed to be doing on your first day. What are you talking about? Well, that guy went from strength to strength. As you remember, he was a guy, he had an attitude. He was angry. He would be angry around his little kid. He'd be angry around his wife. He would, I mean, I can remember that guy, he wanted to be a writer. And so he would push about, I want to write this, I want to write that. And when he couldn't be a writer, because he was very much a pseudo-intellectual kind of guy, he started putting two little dots. You remember the umlauts that he would put over all of our scripts? So an umlaut, the German umlaut, is two little dots, and it shows like two syllables that are divided by vowels. Crazy shit, but it's like old English from like the 1500s. If you write a word like coerce, right, you put an umlaut over the E. Yeah, sure you do in fucking Shakespearean times, but not in a comic book, right? And this guy kept doing it. And we kept saying to him, man, listen, okay, you're pissing everybody off. We don't care about your umlauts, and we don't care about you being in this book. This is a book by Alan Moore. This is a book by Kent Williams. You don't need to be writing umlauts all over this thing. And he kept doing it, and he kept submitting it, and I kept rejecting it. And eventually I went to his office with a piece of paper, and it said, stop being a fucking idiot, written on the piece of paper. And I held it up to his office, and on the O, I put an umlaut because it was two things. I wrote idiot with an umlaut over it because I couldn't take this fucking guy anymore. What a challenge that guy was. And
you know, it's
go ahead.
No, it's one of those things that having been, with some limited experience, the largest company I was involved with was Mirage Studio. And I think at the peak we had probably 21, 20, no more than 25 employees and some freelancers included in the mix. But there was, between all the different people, it was you were part of that mix. Anyways, there were lots of personalities and things that you had to deal with. I mean, so it was just one of those things that Peter and I sometimes would spend very, very 90 hours a week between all the stuff, but you'd be spending just an inordinate amount of time just trying to negotiate sort of inter-office differences or finger pointing, or you go kind of like, well, this was supposed to be sent out. Why wasn't this sent out? And somebody else would go, it was their fault. It was their fault. I didn't do that. They were supposed to bring it in from over there, but I said yes. And then yesterday, and it was just one of those things that you just sort of go like, it doesn't matter. Just come together. Let's get it out the door. And I think that with Tundra, the things that, with characters and people that were quote-unquote vetted and we brought in, that then suddenly you sort of throw that into a smooth running ship or an opportunity, suddenly it just throws it is like throwing a monkey wrench into a whole set of gears and cogs. It just freezes everything, and everything gets it disrupts the flow, and it just adds one more problem, which also adds one more level of frustration and anger, because you just now spent 2 hours dealing with this when you should have been doing that. There was a lot of.
Think of it like this. I always thought of it like a seesaw, right? And here we are. We got a lot of talent propping it up, and we've got a lot of books and difficulties weighing it down. So it's on a balance. It's on a knife edge. And all of a sudden, someone who's a problem employee just comes and sits on one end, and the whole thing goes crashing down. And it would do it. These people were like saboteurs at times. We would then have to kind of reset them, keep them working. That guy ended up being under my charge in production editorial. So, I had to fire him. And that sucks, right? It's a miserable experience to fire someone. I hated it, but we had to do it because we were trying to do the best that we could. And what's going to happen? That guy who's angry comes in, does a terrible job, leaves under a cloud, and resents us for what? For trying really hard. I'll give you another one that I can never forget. It's an interesting story. There was an attorney who was brought in, and that attorney was a massive challenge for two reasons. And there were two things that he did that I can remember, but I probably will remember 1,000 if I do. One of the things he did was come into the Monday morning meetings that I didn't like and Mark didn't like, because we just wanted to get back to work. But we would do them because we wanted to prop up everybody. So we come in, we do the Monday meeting, and this guy would come in. He'd come into town every so often in the Monday meeting, and he would tell us things like, you need a dishwasher. You need a dishwasher in the kitchen. Like, okay, great. Buy one then. Like, stop it. But I remember a very challenging moment with that guy. He ended up doing a contract that had to do with Ninja Turtle reprint, and the contract itself was very challenging. It had some mistakes in it that could have cost you a lot of money. And it was just a publishing mistake. It was like writing a contract and making a few mistakes and then going, oh man, like, look what we did. And I remember finding that and taking it to our vice president and saying, this contract doesn't make any sense. It says something crazy. And then the VP brought it to you, and we all sat around and tried to wrap our heads around how to fix it, because an attorney that you're supposed to trust is making a mistake. By the way, Jazz Neat wrote idiot exactly the way I said. That's exactly what I did. Right? So, yeah, that it's someone that you trust. They're an attorney, for God's sake. And what was the bottom line on that attorney? If you recall, he'd never passed his bar in the state of New York.
and he was fired as well. But it was one of those things that he was a comic book guy. He was an agent and handled contracts for a number of well-known creators, and just became highly recommended that this guy knows comics, knows publishing law, knows this, knows, and he knows what he wants. And so the first bunch of meetings that I had, it was like, remember the contracts that my mandate was after so many years of contracts at Mirage, where you have this 75-page contract for a licensee that's doing belts. I said, I want the contracts to be no more than 2 pages long. If it's a release, it's got to be 1 page. I said, you shouldn't have to, spell out more than these lines that anybody could read and anybody can understand. That in itself took forever, but it was one of those things that, just the simplest document just did not move ahead. And it was one of those, again, when I say we, it's just definitely me, I took the recommendations of people whose word I trusted at that time with this recommendation, and I did not vet him by calling people that he'd worked with before, negotiated before, or even, I think it was, again, probably Susan Alston, who did the research on this guy and found out that he didn't even pass his New York, he did not pass the Bar Association.
He didn't.
So that was, huh?
Well, he didn't pass the bar. And I think the thing is, and I'll say this to everybody who's watching and will watch in future, Kevin's always been a person in my experience that will say, I did this wrong. Because you're the first person to step up and say, I made a mistake. I'm going to do the same thing. I'll step up and say I made a mistake. But at a certain point, I think you can admit that Tundra Publishing was beginning to attract people that were a bit nefarious and were not being honest, and they didn't care about the things that we cared about. They cared about themselves, and they were acting badly. And the problem was, yes, we can say, okay, we didn't vet them properly. Okay, fine, great. We'll hold our hand up. Didn't vet them properly. We were a little busy at the time, if you recall, right? We were a bit busy. And so it's understandable that we take people's recommendations and bring these people in. The fact is, you've got a little bit of a toxic stew. You've got too many people, too many projects, a lot of difficult ones, pressure from the industry, a brand new company, a bit overextended. And now when you bring people in that are not that good, a couple of people, man, can they tip the balance out of whack? And if you think about the amount of hours wasted on these individuals, it's no surprise that our attention was diverted in lots of different directions. That meant perhaps mistakes were understandable. And so what we would do is we might make a mistake because we're trying to solve a problem being caused for us. And I can think of French publishing relationships that we had where they were usury. They were terrible. They were giving you awful deals, and we were trying to fix those deals because someone had said, yeah, this is a fine deal. And then we're looking at it like, this is a terrible deal, So, when an attorney gives you that and says, I agree with this deal, and then it's a terrible deal, we just have to go fix it. And fixing stuff for Tundra created a tipping point that was untenable. Now, we can say this, right? Even though it was hard, you got to admit, there were some fun times, dude. There were some fucking fun times.
Yeah, that was,
so I'll bring one up. Even though it was hard, go into Open Tundra UK. Right? Tell everybody where we did the opening party for Tundra UK, Kev.
It was the British National History Museum.
The Natural History Museum, yeah.
You could rent it for about $20.
Yeah.
20 pounds.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. And I remember, I just had a funny, we have to talk about it because it's funny because there's so many insane images that instantly replay in my mind of everything that went wrong that night, even at the event itself. But it was just one of those things that I remember that part of the idea behind the construction of Tundra UK is that we just had an inordinate amount of British creators, and there were more that we thought we'd like to work with, or perhaps there was an opportunity there. But that was the one hand. The other hand was that the distribution system in the UK. And yes, it's a much smaller market, but it was an important market, especially if you're, publishing Alan Moore's work or Simon Bisley's work or David McKean's work and Neil Gaiman. So we felt that liaisoning with some of the distribution opportunities there could help us increase sales, would be better at hand to coordinate some of the editorial. I remember there was one, I think might have been pre-Tundra UK, but I remember there was a particular creator from the UK who I think came to Tundra US to have this big discussion with you. You were handling his project, and he was really angry because his book is supposed to be bi-monthly, but it was coming out every 4 months. And I think you had to show him the records and go, the problem is why your project's coming out every 4 months is because you're not giving us an issue. You're giving us an issue every 4 months. You're not delivering a bi-monthly issue. If every 4 months you send us an issue, you want to know why it's 4 months, and say, look, here's where we got this part of it. Here's where we got this part. So,
Kevin, you couldn't be more true, right? A creator who comes over to see me to complain about the fact that their book isn't coming out monthly, and they're delivering the book every 4 months. And those were the kind of lunacy that, when people write about Tundra and they look at it and they say that was a crazy time, at times, no one thought it was crazier than those of us in the middle of it that were like, what are you talking about, man? What am I supposed to do? And so then we would take a moment and we would say to that creator, look, could you please understand that, we're doing everything we can, but why don't you, as we say in Britain, wind your neck in, right? Like, check your ego at the door for a second, because we can't put your book out every month if you deliver it every 4 months. It basically doesn't work that way. And then have the creator go home and maybe they're feeling better now, and maybe they still resent us, and we're just sitting there in a pool of blood like, what just happened? We just got run over by a creator, right? It was a challenge, but I will tell you that the team, the group of people that we started to nurture, the good people. Do you remember our epic paintball battles near your house?
Oh my.
These great paintball battles, right? And because Kevin was flush, Kevin would always kind of supply the paint, right? Because, he'd always be really generous about it. And I remember that we used to have these battles, and it would always be in the fucking snow. And so we'd be in the middle of February in Massachusetts doing paintball battles. And the problem is the paintballs don't break because they're frozen. And so you'd get hit in the arm and leg, and you would come home and your body would just be black and blue. But I think we may have told this story, but I'll tell it again. At one point, Kevin says, come over, we're going to play paintball. And we're like, you know what? We could use the time. We all come over, we have a beer or two, and we're like, this is going to be great. We kit ourselves up. And you had this shed up at your house. And all of a sudden, an engine starts. And we're like, what is that noise? And you open the door and you drive a tank, like a literal tank, out the front door. And the hatch pops up and you start spraying everybody with paintballs. And I was like, what is going on? It was the coolest thing. Like, that was one of the moments that always stuck with me as one of the funniest and coolest moments that we had, because we had a fucking tank. and it was really early on in Tundra. It might even have been at the end of Mirage, but it was kind of like we were having fun, man. We were enjoying ourselves. We were trying really hard. We had paintball.
Like camaraderie stuff that you want to build. It's like, we have everybody up, and as we did it was like did a couple in the winter, which were really funny. And I think the first couple we did in the winter, which was that we found out that was a bit of a mistake. That there was, they would have a cookout afterwards, and we did a couple in the summer and stuff. And we had the tank thing was actually, even when it was delivered to Tundra, then we took it up there. But the tank was a blast. And I remember it was funny because Mark Bodie brought he bought a Korean era ambulance, like you'd see on MASH with the big red cross on it. Remember when Bodie used to drive that around? So he brought that up.
Yeah.
He arrived this hide in his ambulance and shoot at people. But it was just great to all get together and you figure all this camaraderie and this team thing. I remember them, probably not appropriate, but I'm going to say it. And just remember there was one particular editor one particular person that worked at the company that was, the person wasn't there that long. We got into a paintball game and he showed up with a red flannel shirt on.
Yes.
Everybody else is camo. And so he was like, the person was like, should I have camo on? And we were like, oh, it's not that kind of game. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Just stay Wilkin. And then it was during the game, because the idea of the game was, if you get hit 3 times on our system, you come out, I'm dead. You go back and wait for the game to end because it was usually like a capture the flag or something. I just remember it was just hear these screams of like, I'm dead. And
I'm dead.
so
Everyone's still shooting.
And he's like, I kept saying I was dead, but everybody kept shooting me. I was like, but no, those kind of things were like, sort of you try to take a break, like the softball team and some other things and some other stuff that we did. It was always sort of like get the troops around the table and just sort of let them unwind a little bit, have a beer or two, eat some food, and
you were really cool about that, Kev. Like we worked hard and we kind of played hard, like we had, I'll never forget, like some of my favorite birthday parties in my life were in those days with which group of people were really cool? The people back in the warehouse.
Oh yes.
We had a warehouse, we had 6 people back there. And that group, I would spend more of my free time back there with those guys hanging out with the warehouse people all the time because everyone was really cool and we enjoyed each other's company. But we had a Tundra softball team, which is really funny because I was a lifetime soccer player. Mm-hmm. And they start this softball team. And I've never done the glove before in my life. And the first time we went out to practice, they said, put the glove on. And it kept hurting my hand really badly. I was like, damn, right? So Kevin always makes fun of me because I used to get injured I could get injured apparently playing softball. And in my first practice, someone hit the ball over my head and I went to go get it. And someone said, look out. And I turned around and the ball hit me right in the head. And it cut my head open. And I went around in a circle and I passed out. And after that, I looked like the Frankenstein monster because it was the stitch of the baseball that was all across my head, right? The softball. But I've got the best story. So we played our very first game and I didn't know the rules very well. And so for anyone that knows baseball or softball, bases are loaded, nobody's out, and I'm in left field. And someone bloops the single. And one thing I could at least do was run pretty fast because I played a lot of soccer. And for some reason, I was standing in the wrong place. And so they blooped the ball over, but I was already running in to catch it. And I dived and I caught it. And I stood up and stumbled forward. And I realized I was standing in the base paths. And they said, tag him. So I tagged the person next to me. And then I ran towards third base. I didn't know what to do. So I tagged the base and then I tagged the third baseman. Then I tagged the runner. And it was an unassisted triple play. Right? So the umpire said, I've never seen one of those. And I said, I've never played before. Right. That was literally my first game. So good memories, man. Fun stuff.
Yeah, no, so we used to worry about you playing cards, we'd say, because like you'd end up with some injury. Because that's how we first met you when you were injured trying to serve us food.
That's right. Yeah, I had a big bolt in my leg when I first met you. Yeah, but I one thing that I'll say about the warehouse guys, we had a little kind of dark humor. We were so tired of people after a while. We were pretty cynical about like some of the employees, and we kind of got them out. And we had this is really naughty. Sorry, but I don't know if you knew this, but you probably would have told us off. We had some rafters in the back in the warehouse because we had a lot of camaraderie, and there was that pub just behind the warehouse, right? And we retired the jerseys of all the people that we got rid of. So we hung them up in the warehouse.
No, it's
I know. Sorry.
It's one of those things that, different place, but and even it's just funny. I'm glad you brought up like again, it's not defense. It's just sort of the realities of our intent to make this company work. Is one of the ideas that I had early on, and I kind of got like some of it inspired by heavy metal because I bought Heavy Metal magazine at the time and stuff. And Heavy Metal had a large warehouse that we ended up moving up into the East Hampton area later. But we had this warehouse, and not the biggest, but one steady source of income was back issue sales. And so I thought that would be an important part of the company because we would see like even at Heavy Metal, because we had done books and some books within Heavy Metal, and we'd go to the Diamond retailer shows and some of the other capital cities, some of the retailer incentive shows, and you'd be sitting at the table and you'd have this stack of even the Tundra went to some of those as well, and we'd have George Pratt's World War I sketchbook and this book and that book, and these retailers would come out and go, "Wow, I love that book. I kept calling the distributor and asking for more, and they kept telling me it was sold out." And so, they said pretty much everything on this table. I was selling this stuff, but I just could never get them from the retailer, from the distributor. And so that just made my blood boil. I would just say, "Give me your card. Do you need anything from us? You want to sell? We'll sell at the same cost you buy the Diamond. We'll sell them direct." So we built the warehouse component as part of that, and it was pretty steady. I mean, those guys worked, and by the end of the day, I remember like go out and say hi to the boys, Johnny and Vic and everybody, and they'd be playing cards because they've wrapped up their day and just waiting for 5 o'clock to go hit the pub behind the place. But it was an important component of our business, so we moved a bunch of the stuff, and it was it was a time where it was pre-websites. We didn't have, I think the web was just sort of coming to be, but it wasn't a marketing tool or sales tool or anything like that. So we would do inserts in Heavy Metal magazine of Tundra products. We could order stuff, but it was always you had to flip out the form and do that. And we try to, market stuff directly to comic stores and things. But so it was anything to make the company work.
We needed to do it, right? Tundra needed to do this. We needed to have a warehouse. We needed to do it. But I want to be clear. I think it's fair, for the sake of posterity. I can tell you from my perspective, being the editor, being the director of publishing, right? We went to a number of Diamond and capital city seminars where we were told by retailers, "We can't get your books." To which our response is, "What the hell are you talking about? How could you not get our books? We have them. We want you to buy them." And I remember the seminal moment where we realized something is wrong. And that moment was when we published From Hell by Alan Moore, right? From Hell, where Alan had been publishing Big Numbers, right? Big Numbers was selling as a 48-page square-bound book, was selling like 120,000 copies at whatever the price point was for a 48-page book. So Alan Moore is going to be selling you a lot of comics. And I've often said to people, okay, so now we come out with Alan Moore's next big project. How many copies do you think we got an order for issue number 1, which was a perfect bound book? And it was, if anything, cheaper than Big Numbers, maybe, I don't know, about the same. So if he's selling 120,000 copies of Big Numbers and we come out with his next book, how many copies do you think we sold? And people will go, I don't know, 200,000. And I say, no, lower. And they say, okay, maybe about 50,000. No, the answer was that we got our first orders in from retailers and we sold 2,560 copies. How could we have sold 2,560 copies? That didn't even compute. And when we went to the Diamond and Capital City and we sat there next to each other and we said we would have retailers come up and they'd be mad at us. I ordered 50 copies of that book. You only sent me 2. Well, let's be clear, okay, dude? We didn't send you 2. You somehow only got 2. And we knew something was up at that point. Something was wrong. And I would love to know what that was, but somehow we were getting shafted. And I don't know what happened, and I don't know why. I've always suspected that Tundra Publishing was a threat to somebody. But how could you have this happen to us? We were publishing Alan Moore, and we sold 2,500 copies of his new book. Bullshit. We didn't sell 2,500 copies. We sold 120,000 copies, but they only sent 2,500. And once you could see that something was around us, that was bad. Go ahead.
No, it was very, because it was you're right. I mean, that was actually we'll get to Jasneet's question in a sec, but there was because there was a lot of writing, there was a lot of stuff that was a lot in there. But the thing was, like, even when we did that, again, we'd go to these things and we'd have frustration. We'd go have very loud discussions with them, and why? And they're going like, "That's what was turned in. That's what we're doing." And so the thing is, it's like at that time you had 2 very powerful companies that were, and then we'd almost get like the same amount of orders from, say, Diamond as you would from Capital City before Diamond came in and took over everything. And so their big business, or their main business, was the bigger companies. It's obvious. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but I know that if you're selling millions of copies of Marvel comics and you're selling millions of copies of DC comics, and those 2 people tell you, it's like, well, do us a favor. No quid pro quo or anything, but we'd have those numbers, but it would be like, because it would be, I think the second or third seminar we went to, and we would just select the business cards from these retailers. I said, we try to order your books, but you keep telling us this. So I remember we just took this thing and dumped it on Seamus's desk, and I just, this thing, and I go, all these people tell us every time they try to order our books, you're telling them they're not in print. You go, oh, that can't be possible. And I'm like, I'm not imagining it. What's going on? So it was very, very frustrating. So we had hoped to go more direct to retailer when we could at the same discounts, but then they would get, you sort of like go, yeah, I'd really love to, but I think that went further on to some of these distributors that had favorable terms, and they would, terms with the retailers. If the retailer's running a little behind, and it's like, if you want to keep getting your books on a regular basis from me, overlook, some of the COD, make sure you can stay in business. Don't order any of those other people's books. And it's highly illegal, and I'm not accusing anybody, but the potential of something like that to happen was there. And it's not a defense mechanism, but the fact is, exactly as you said, books that should have sold hundreds of thousands, 100,000 copies were selling 2,000.
Right. And I want to make something very clear, right? And I think this is fair for us to make clear. People can look back at Tundra Publishing, and they can ask us what happened, and we have a lot more to talk about next time. We'll talk about the specific projects, and that will blow people's minds, right? But let's be clear about what happened right there. We could sell our books if we were able to provide those books to the retailers that were ordering them at the numbers that they ordered. In other words, if a retailer come up to me and said, I ordered 50 copies of From Hell, the next question shouldn't be, why did you only send me 2? Because we didn't send you only 2. Somebody did. And we were sitting there mystified. How is it that our sales are this bad in this market? It could not possibly have been true. But we kept going to distributor seminars. We kept finding out. We would go to the retailer seminars. We would go to Diamond, Capital City, and Heroes World. And we would try to make sense of what was happening. And we would have retailer after retailer say, I would like to carry your product, but I can't find it. To which we would say, we have a giant fucking warehouse full of it. How can you say it? We want to support the distributors, and we want to make sure it works properly. So we don't want to sell directly to retailers, but at what point are you going to make us do it? Well, guess what? when we started selling directly to retailers, at that point, we're outside the distribution system and the distributors are not going to support us. So we couldn't win. We were damned if we did and damned if we didn't. And when people look at whether or not Tundra Publishing had some issues, they might want to look very carefully at that issue, because I've never gotten over it. I've never been able to explain it, and I've never been able to forgive what happened, because that wasn't us. That had nothing to do with us. It had nothing to do with how the company was run. It was being done to us.
No, exactly. It really was like, it was even after I moved on, Tundra was merged with Kitchen Sink, and then I was still doing a lot of stuff with heavy metal. You know, we'd still do a number of retailer events when Diamond basically took over and forced everybody out of business, and then they even had more control over the distribution. It would be the same thing. It's like we'd go to these seminars and we'd just have a table full of, you know, Mobius books, you know, Bilal books, you know, Rangsarars, Tonino Liberatore, 25 years of heavy metal, Art of Simon Bisley, you know, just on and on and on. And we'd have these retailers go out and go, you know, I got 2 books in, I sold them, you know, I didn't even get them on the shelf, and I sold them, and I've been trying to reorder these books for 6 months, and I cannot get them through Diamond. They just will not, you know, keep saying it's out of print, it's out of print, it's out of print. And then you go and yell at them, and they say, you know, our system isn't set up for this kind of reordering and this kind of stuff. And they said, well, you know, and luckily around that time, e-commerce was starting to become more of a viable, realistic thing. So we were starting to do more, but we would just put, a lot of it was still, people would clip stuff out of Heavy Metal magazine and fill out the form and send it to us, and we'd send that out of the warehouse, because it was it was a frustrating system for sure.
Yeah. Well, to finish up today, because just as a kind of a precursor, next time that we do this, the second part of the Tundra thing will be project specific. And man, do we have some stories for you guys, because when you hear about some of the way these projects came about, I think people will never understand it. And I'll preface that by saying this. I have seen any number of interviews about Tundra Publishing, and frankly, I've never really seen one that I felt was fair, because either the questions were loaded, or is edited in a bad way, or somebody had an agenda. The truth is, I can point to 2 people that were there from the beginning and pretty much closed the doors. I actually left just before it became Kitchen Sink. We were there from the beginning, closed the doors. And the fact is, we know what happened. You and I do. We were there. We know who did what. We know who behaved a certain way. And so we'll talk about like the creators and what it was that we dealt with and these projects. But I do want to address what Jazz Neat had asked up there earlier on, because it was something that we asked at the beginning, right? Which is, you know, the comic book journal article. So for those who don't know, the comic book journal article with Kevin, I will tell you from my perspective, Kevin, I'm not sure that you and I have really ever talked about it that much, but I read it, and I think my immediate reaction was, that's bullshit, right? I know it was an interview with you, but it was presented in such an unflattering way at a time when I think you were very vulnerable, and you have a habit. You have a habit that speaks well of you, but it's maybe not your best habit, which is you take responsibility for everything, including things that were not your fault, right? Or you shouldn't take responsibility for, because it was being done to you. So you can't just say, well, I messed up there. It's like, not really. So the comic book journal had a very slanted view of what happened with Tundra. It seemed as though it was super comprehensive. It was very big. But the fact is, man, you know, there are things that appeared in that journal, in that interview. And I'm going to speak to one of them, and then I'll let you go, right? I'll let you go on it. There was a creator who accused me in the comic book journal of embarrassing Tundra with Neil Gaiman. This is the great story that this creator tells. Well, you know, I was in Great Britain, and Paul Jenkins was sitting with Neil Gaiman, and the things that Paul Jenkins was saying were just embarrassing. And I was embarrassed for him, and Neil was trying to be polite, but, you know, Paul obviously didn't know what he was talking about. And I contacted that creator afterwards, and I said, let me point something out to you, fuckface. I was never in Great Great Britain at the same time as Neil Gaiman. At no time did I go to Great Britain and sit with Neil Gaiman. I've lived in this country for a long time. And so the thing that you say happened in Great Britain could not have happened because I've never been in Great Britain with Neil Gaiman. All of my interactions with Neil have all been in America. And so the guy said, oh, yeah, well, maybe I was thinking of someone else. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But the problem and the reason why I'm frustrated with you is that you printed it. You printed it in the Comics Journal. You trashed my name for a thing that you now admit, yeah, okay, maybe I got someone else in mind. And I said, you know what you need to do? You need to print a retraction and an apology, right? You need to make it clear that when you ran your mouth about what happened at Tundra and you didn't tell the truth, that you messed up and you need to retract it. And instead of doing that, that guy retracted it and made an apology in the back of his independent comic that sold 1,000 copies. Right? So when I see people talking about what happened at Tundra, and I know that it's not true, and I know that they threw you under the bus and me under the bus, comment on this Comics Journal thing, mate, because I've never been happy about that Comic Journal interview, and I don't think it was fair at all. What about you?
Well, the thing is, it's the reason it was definitely written with an agenda. I remember Gary Groth actually printed in one of the issues of the Comics Journal when the Tundra Kitchen Sink merger was announced, and he went on this mini rant, and I can find it if I actually dig through it, and he just basically said, "This is a complete ripoff. There's a big smoke screen. There's something big going on here because that was my deal. Tundra and Fantagraphics was supposed to merge. We were supposed to, he was going to take over." And I just looked at it and I went, that never was a discussion. I never had the discussion with you. It was just never. I don't know where it came from. Just maybe you got angry that because you had this long and ongoing feud, like Dennis Kitchen and Gary Groth would fight over Peanuts reprints or the latest Crumb book, or Gary was angry because Dennis was friends with Will Eisner, and so they'd fight over projects constantly and always call it, be butting heads and stuff. So when Dennis got the deal, he just had to be vindicated. Like, that was my deal, and Dennis stole it away, and so there's nothing positive. So anything that happened, anybody that had any dirt on Tundra, they had, there was like a Veach interview, which I read it, and Veach was one of the founding. He was an official consultant to the company, and just I read what he wrote, what he said, and I was just like, I don't understand what basis in reality you're sort of, whether you're defending yourself on this thing. Like I said earlier, that like it's written in the Comics Journal that Veach said him and Bissett went on this ongoing tirade with Gary Quentin at the company to Tundra should not ever publish superhero comic books. We published some of our most successful comic books were Rick Veach's Rat Pack superhero comic and Rick Veach's Maximortal superhero comic.
Yep.
And so I just don't know how they could say that there, and then it's sort of like you can go, you're saying you said this here, but then you brought these projects to Tundra that we published. So it was just sort of, they had done an interview and Bissett had done an interview, and there was even we'll get it to next time. There was even a mini interview with an artist that was paid for his artwork. I bought the original artwork, and he tore up and burnt the artwork.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. And by the way, that artist is Al Columbia on Big Numbers, and I was the editor on Big Numbers, and we will talk about that because that story has never been told. It's never been told.
But he said in a specific Comics Journal interview that I never did that. I never burnt the artwork. It's like we had a big falling out for other reasons. I still have the artwork in my house, and it's this and that. It was a completely fabricated because we didn't realize that he had a lot of other issues going on. But it was just sort of like the way that it was staged, that it was like, he says in one of the opening things, like, I heard Eastman was slippery as an eel, so I had to be really careful when I interviewed him. I'm like, slippery? What?
Yeah.
I don't understand what kind of slippery as an eel I were. Or was this?
out for a second. It's hard for me to even hear that, because I'm here to tell you that Kevin is one. Listen, Kevin's a fuck up. Okay, you want to hear that? Kevin's a fuck up. He's too generous, right? He's too nice. He's too trusting. He's too honest. Okay, that's Kevin's mistake. You're going to call Kevin as slippery as an eel? I'll come across this fucking table at you, because that's the one thing that you're not. Okay, you've never been slippery. You've never been. You're an idiot. Right? Spent too much money on that. You know, made a mistake. Okay, great. I can admit to all of that stuff, but no one's going to say that you were slippery, because that's just wrong, man.
You know, it's just, you know, that he had an agenda, and you know, so the interview was, but the fine thing was like, look, it's like, and when he showed up to do the interview, he said, well, what things can we talk about? What things can I not talk about? And I said, I've invited you down because I've seen you print anything that anybody has said about Tundra. So ask me anything. I'll tell you anything, exactly what I thought, or what my understanding is, what happened at that time. Pretty much that's it. So, but it's just a matter of, you know, he asked the questions and I answered them as I saw them, and truthfully, in some cases, easily verifiable. Lots of Tundra records or things. You know, it was. It's like, here's the truth. Here's the way I see it, and that's it. I don't know what else to say. It's like, but that was, it was one of those that it's like, you put that kind of thing out there, and you just go like, you know, do your research, and you know, if you can prove something I said in this article is something wrong or incorrect, ask me about it, and I'll either correct it or adjust it. But everything that I said in there was like, you know, it was like, if you're, you know, President of the United States, and under your watch, you allow things to happen. Mistakes were made by people that you brought or people you interacted with. It was still under your watch. So my feeling is exactly that. I feel like, you know, under my watch and what I did, and what we all try to do, because it was never malicious or evil or nefarious, or we tried to take advantage of anybody. It was just very, it was positive. The whole thing, like you started this whole discussion with, it was all about the artwork, the project, the Creators Bill of Rights, you know, furthering the medium, you know, making us sort of a safe haven for creators that have great ideas that could be the next Turtles if they want, or nothing above, you know, if that's what they don't want either. But it was just sort of this thing that was a great moment in time. And you could have regrets. I don't have regrets. It's sad that I let people take advantage of me, but that was my fault. That was my decision. So it's sort of like, no, but I mean, you can find the Comics Journal article on Kevin Eastman Studios. It's like, I put it out there. It's not like, you know, it's some big dark secret. I don't want somebody to dig through back issue bins to find it. It's just a matter of one of those things that you can go to the website and download it and read it if you want. It's 80 pages, and it's like, but it is what it
good
is.
Luck.
I think, you know, well, the interesting part is, you know, it's just some of the stuff that we talk about with this company and the things that it went through at the time. It was just, I'd see it as like the right idea at the wrong time. You know, just, it was a missed opportunity. I feel like, you know, Tundra was done 10 years later. I think the end result could have been different, but it really came down to better management structure. Like, I took on way too many projects, and it was just, you can see the sort of navigational mistakes, but it was one of those.
Right, but let's go between the navigational mistakes and the bad intent, right? If you make mistakes, if you make a mistake, we strategy wise, we did this, that wasn't a very good idea. Strategy, okay, fine. You and I are going to be the first people to hold a hand up and say, yeah, I wish we'd done that differently, right? You'll be first. You'll always go, yeah, I made a mistake. But that's never with bad intent. Whereas we were surrounded by an awful lot of people that were very self-serving, that had bad intent. They wanted a bit of money out of Tundra. They wanted to do these things. And so, you know, when you look, like, here's what I think that we did wrong from my perspective. It's okay. We overextended ourselves at the time.
Yes.
We were younger, and we thought that we could do all of those things. So, at a certain point, man, we had a pre-production house down the street, and I was driving down the street to that pre-pro house, remember, and trying to negotiate with 2 New York bloody criminals who were not scheduling our work properly. They were scheduling their own work, right? And I was a young guy. And then we went and tried to get into the music side of it, and we had this studio, Tundra Studios, up in Portland, Maine, and it was a bad idea, man. It was never going to work. It was hard. We were trying to make it work. Probably we overextended ourselves. We did too many different things. It was difficult, right?
Well, the thing is, it's again, it was like it's interesting. The music studio is one of those things that, like, when the opportunity was brought to me and I had a lawyer look at the deal, this company was profiting $25,000 a month. The minute I bought it, they were not profiting, they were losing money. But we had projects like audiobooks were a big thing, and Ian Valentine, we had a number of conversations with Ian Valentine and said that audiobooks were on the rise, and this could be one of the new ways in the bookstore. We also had John Muth did Mythology of the Banner City, which had a soundtrack. We had seen the success of Bill Sienkiewicz's Jimi Hendrix album. I mean, that was a big bookstore thing that came with the soundtrack. There were other things. Rick Charette, we wanted to do some more kids stuff. And so it was an idea that was, again, with the right intent, but the company failed a month after I bought it, which then it started hemorrhaging, and then none of the projects, and then they had to take on other work, and then our work got sort of put to the side. So it was just those pieces that didn't come through. And then even with I bought into Limelight Entertainment, Steve Barron's company, which was they did the Turtles movie, and we'd explored a number of projects together. And so I invested in the company, and they had, within the first year of me being part owner and them going out there multiple times, and I think you came to some of them, was to try to set up some of these projects as entertainment projects. They were getting into TV, they were getting into movies. Steve had directed a couple of movies, and they had a number of great directors that were doing commercials and music videos that were doing that stuff. And the main partner of the company stole $500,000. Got fired, wiped out the company. They ended up leaving the States because it was just completely. And it's like it was Richard Branson was one of the other owners of Limelight, as I mentioned in one of our last talks. So they retreated to the UK, and I kid you not, there was another guy in the UK office that did the same thing. He just pillaged and stole 500. It was a little less, I think, but he stole from the company. And so basically, you had this company they were the #1 music video commercial company in Hollywood in the States, and well known throughout Europe. Steve's work and some of the others. That within a year I bought it, they were basically out of business. It just kind of went like, all right, so I pissed somebody off somewhere along the line.
Yeah,
so,
it felt like bad decisions, bad luck, bad people sometimes, right? But like it was a weird time in history. I remember going up to that studio because you let me and my band record up in that studio, and it was kind of a twofold thing. We went and recorded. We were super grateful. We got to record our stuff and work with their engineer. And a little part of it, just a little bit, was for us to find out what that studio was, right? Like, what were they doing? It's not like we could go up to Portland, Maine all the time and keep working it. So it was like, hey, Paul, listen, hey, buddy, listen, you can go and record with your band and, record some music. Okay, great. So we go up there to record. And then we meet the people running the studio, and we say to them, okay, can you show us your books? And they go, what? And you go, no, just what's your calendar? Like, what do you have on the books? And they bring their book out, their scheduling book, and they've got nothing. Now, while we're there in the middle of freaking October or November, it was really cold, Rod Stewart was in town. And he ended up coming into the studio and recording a song that ended up being quite famous. And they got some work, and they're like, we got Rod Stewart in. I'm like, yeah, that was the only thing you ever got in. So that paid what, for like a week's worth of the studio? And then nothing.
I remember that.
Yeah, crazy, right? So it's not like you can do that much except believe what's happening and believe what's being done around you. And it plenty of times it didn't work out. So I think what we'll do is we'll bring it to an end there, because that's a really interesting way to talk about, like, okay, people learned that the intent of Tundra was to be incredible. The intent of Tundra was to benefit creators. It was run by some people that worked really hard, that cared very much. And what we began to see from our perspective was like, wow, this is mad. Like, we're trying. I'm going to say two things over the course of this one and next one. And there are two comments that you said to me. I'll say one of them this time and one of them at the end of the next one, because there are two comments that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life, Kevin. I sat with you one time in LA after Tundra, and we were talking about it maybe 3 or 4 years after Tundra. And you said, you know what Tundra is for you and me? Tundra is an itch that we can never scratch. And I'll never forget it, because we've never scratched it. We've never been able to take the scab off of it, because it was heartbreaking. It was really difficult to do.
Yep.
So I will say in advance of next week, what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about the truth of what happened with some of these projects, because I think when people hear them, they are not going to believe some of them. And we're going to talk about big numbers. We've never done it. I've heard, I hear someone, Rob here says, you can read it for a second. This is Al Columbia's comment on me in the context of big numbers. Now, this is a long time ago. And I understand that Al was younger and he messed up. But, here's the one thing that's never happened. You've never heard my version of it, and you've never heard Kevin's version of it. You've never heard the actual truth happen with that project. You've just heard a bunch of self-serving people talk about what happened with it. So next time you and I get a chance to tell people what really happened around the back of that business, right?
So
and maybe we'll
we get the documents and the receipts to back it up. So,
yep.
But anyway, yeah.
And maybe we'll scratch that itch a little bit, Kevin.
Okay. All right.
Well, look, man. This has been almost fun.
No, it's one of those. It's good to talk about again for a number of reasons, because it is sort of like, like you said, it's an itch you never scratch, but it's part of processing it. And it's been years since I sort of, it's like you can't unring a bell. You can't, hindsight's always 20/20. It's always things that you had wished for this or wished for that. It would have been great if we had that, but it was just one of those lessons that had to be learned, and it was a painful one. But it is like, you sort of go like, well, try to get it right next time. It's like, so yeah, it's good to and it's out there.
It's not all negative, because we can pull the positives from it, like what we tried to do for creators, what good creators, some of them were amazing. Working with Alan Moore was brilliant, right? So, there's plenty of good stories told, but yeah. So anyway, thanks, man, for appreciate it. And thanks everyone for coming along. And next time we will peel off that Band-Aid. See ya.